Well, here we are on a Saturday morning, which is not a morning we usually have a podcast, myself and Pat, but there's a reason for it. In Donegal, Pat's waiting with a very special guest. Pat, can you explain yourself?
Yes, some people might know this guy. He's called Jeremy Corbyn.
Apparently, yes, I've heard of him.
Apparently, he's a big fish in British politics.
Yeah.
So he's here. Actually, Jeremy's here for the Bloody Sunday commemoration, the 50th anniversary. And I think he's probably, if not one of the most admired politicians in Britain, the most admired for many, many reasons. So I am honoured and delighted to have him here this morning.
Well, indeed.
By the way, he told me he'd pay me later for that one.
Yeah. We're still negotiating. We're going to negotiate a price here, but I've got an agent working with me.
Okay. Let's start with the first thing. Why are you here for the Bloody Sunday?
50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday is a huge and poignant occasion. I remember Bloody Sunday.
What age were you, Jeremy, when you?
I was then 23.
Yeah.
I was a young person living in London, working for a union at that time, the National Union of Tailors and Garment Workers, which had members over here, and active in unions and politically and so on in London. And then we got the news of what had happened, and it was just okay. Lots of stuff had already happened because the troops had gone in 1969, but it was just totally shocking. And then everyone was talking about it. And then what I noticed was the way the story changed quite quickly in the media, from being victims, innocent people who were shot down on the street, to somehow or other the victims were the guilty ones and the ones who did the shooting were the innocent ones in some bizarre way. And that narrative was carried on. And so the following week we had a march in solidarity from Kilburn to Whitehall, which was huge, very tense, huge police presence, and a lot of trouble at the end, and a lot of arrests at the end of it, including me. And then the campaign went on for years. We had the solidarity marches pretty well every year, same route, Kilburn to central London. The National Front, the right-wing fascist National Front, then started harassing the march. Media started attacking it. The numbers of prominent people reduced, and it became that sense of isolation of the Irish community in London speaking up on all this. And then later I became a member of Parliament, 11 years later, 1983. And my constituency has a large Irish community. It's probably got the largest number of Irish-born people in any constituency in Britain, or somewhere near that. And Archway in that area used to be very much a sort of centre of the Irish community. So I obviously took up cases of internment, of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, imprisonments or disappearances. We used to have these mad phone calls. I'd phone up the Paddington Green police station on a Sunday night and say, have you got so-and-so in your cells? Because a boy was expected to come back from Dublin, hadn't arrived back, and his mum would call me up and say, what's happened to my son? So I ring them up, they'd say, we can't confirm or deny. So then you'd sort of keep them on the phone for long enough, and sometimes they kind of give way. And I'd say, well, so you're denying you've got Sean there, so it's absolutely the case that Sean is not in your police station. He said, no, I never said that. I said, so you're not saying he's not there. Okay, I think we're making progress. We're making. So at that point, I'd call Gareth Pearce or a lawyer, and we'd then move in on it. It was horrendous.
Jeremy,
but one of the things on this. So then the campaign then in support of the Bloody Sundays families became more organised, more effective, and delegations and all that. And then after Widgery, there was a much more serious campaign to get justice, because Widgery clearly didn't give any kind of justice.
Well, there's two questions come out of that. Why did you pick the side of the people in Derry who were shot? surely the simpler thing for a politician, or a would-be politician as you were then, would be to go on the side of the British state and the establishment. Surely you must have known the equivalent of the Sun and the BBC and everyone else. Once our boys are involved, you know, if you say, look, they've done something they shouldn't have, you're on the wrong side of.
They were the victims.
Yeah.
They were innocent. They were the victims. It had to stand with them.
Yeah. And what do you think the lessons 50 years on are?
The lessons are that people should be much more skeptical about the initial story they hear, much more skeptical and concerned about power. Also recognize, and I hope this improves, the history of Ireland, the history of the people of Ireland, and that the sending in the troops in 1969, initially cautious welcome, I suppose is the way you'd put it,
Yeah.
but not much more than that. They eventually became a determination to get a military solution. There was never going to be a military solution, and indeed Sunningdale was a chance that was passed up. Was it not?
74.
74.
Can I ask you a
Sunningdale.
question, Jeremy? How is it possible that a total of 14 people were killed in open daylight, and 50 years later, not a single person has been punished for what was obviously murder?
Exactly my point, and I'm speaking about this afternoon in the Guildhall on this, and that is the whole point, that 50 years on. Question one, it was a peaceful march, yes or no? Obviously yes. Question, why were the paratroopers engaged for that day? Elite regiment. Question, why were they armed? If they were meant to be policing a peaceful march, what are they doing armed to the teeth? And then those poor people died, their families suffered forever, 50 years they've been suffering already from this. And as you say, nobody has been prosecuted. And so the amnesty bill is designed to shut the whole thing down. Well,
how could they get away with it for 50 years?
They, absolutely.
I mean, if you or I killed somebody, they wouldn't wait 50 years before they brought a case against us.
Exactly, and this is the whole point about the accountability of police and the military. And if you don't have a process that is prepared to prosecute people, army, police, or whatever, when they do wrong, then clearly there's something badly wrong with that process. And as you said, nobody has been prosecuted for Bloody Sunday, even though the Prime Minister of the day, Cameron, did give a very long statement to Parliament at the end of the inquiry. That doesn't amount to any legal action. All it amounted to was a statement saying that what happened was wrong. And I remember Cameron's statement saying something at the end like, I love the British Army as much as or more than anybody else, but I have to say when they're wrong, they've got to be called out for it. Good line, good statement. But if it doesn't go any further, what's it mean?
Sort of ludicrous in some ways, because I mean, you kill somebody and 40 years later, the Prime Minister says sorry. If my loved ones were involved in that, I don't think that would satisfy me.
No, I don't think it satisfied people. I don't know if it was designed to or not. I don't know, but Cameron never struck me as somebody that was particularly knowledgeable or involved in Irish politics or Irish history, or indeed anybody else's history, come to that.
Yeah. Jeremy, do you think that you know, you mentioned it earlier on, this thing about legacy, Johnson's trying to shut it down, and Brandon Lewis is clearly indicating that he wants it shut down. Do you think anything's going to happen, or can the people of Bloody Sunday just say, look, your children were shot dead in the street, but nothing's going to be done about it?
I think the people of Bloody Sunday and the people of Derry have got to continue saying very, very loudly, we're not going to allow this thing to be shut down. We're not going to allow it to go away. We're going to be here for the long haul. Now, I was giving the parallel yesterday when I was doing this chat with Eamon McCann, that the same time as Bloody Sunday, there was the Shrewsbury pickets who were imprisoned, condemned, lives changed for what was claimed to be illegal picketing activities in building sites in Shropshire at the time. It was a lie, it was nonsense, and all these years later, they finally won compensation in the courts for it. And that was unbelievably dogged determination. Yesterday, we had the Hillsborough campaigners here. Sadly, these things take a very long time. I was involved in Guildford and Birmingham cases, both of them. And it was extraordinary, the amount of abuse I got for merely questioning the judgments against the Birmingham 6 and Guildford 4. I could have papered the walls of the house with the abusive letters I got. These days, you just get emails and you can't send them. Abusive emails are much easier to deal with than abusive letters.
So, Jeremy, the last question on this, because we'll move on. What do you think of the lessons of Bloody Sunday are?
The need for solidarity with the victims of crime, and it was a crime, and the need to show empathy and support for them. But the other thing I'm constantly shocked by is this failure to appreciate that a horrible thing happens. Those people are shot dead, killed. The funerals take place, the memorials take place, and so on. The trauma for the families is huge, and particularly the trauma for the women is huge, because they're expected to be the strong person in the family and keep the family together. They often don't want to show their emotion because they don't want to show weakness in front of children or the rest of the family. And I had some quite traumatic conversations yesterday with some groups of women, and you'd know this from your own work, who've just been through and continue to go through massive trauma. And that trauma becomes intergenerational. Their children will also pick that up. And so the actions of the British Army in 1972 are wrecking people's lives 50 years on. And if you and I were talking again in, say, 20 years' time, there's still going to be that trauma there.
Right, Jeremy, we're going to change the subject now. Tell me something, is socialism dead?
No, socialism is alive and well. And if we want to deal with the climate crisis, want to deal with the inequality crisis, want to deal with the aspirational crisis of young people, you cannot do it by free market economics. You can only do it by an economy that actually works for all. My whole philosophy is about creating a society where you don't leave people behind.
Well, how does someone like Boris Johnson get an 83-seat majority? And by the way, you shouldn't do it, but this is a podcast, not a political thing. Like, I look at that man and I see a clown. So you don't have to answer that, by the way. How does someone get that big a majority?
Well, two things about the 2019 election. Obviously, the result from my point of view, from the Labour Party's point of view, was absolutely terrible. I get that. We got over 10 million votes, which would have given us a majority in the last 3 elections before that, which is okay. That's the problem of the first past the post system. He got it by giving this sort of simplistic answer: we'll get Brexit done. I challenged him on selling off the National Health Service to American healthcare companies. I was accused of spreading Russian false rumors. I mean, I'm still trying to work this one out, quite why the Russians would want to spread false rumors about the NHS being bought by the Americans. I mean, it takes some. John le Carre isn't around to help us with that.
That's
one. So, and that one, and the other one was the question of how he's going to deal with Brexit. He said it'll all be fine, and I said no, it won't. You won't get it done in 6 months. You won't get it done. You're going to have to have some kind of trading relationship with Europe, and that brings into with it a huge problem for Northern Ireland. He said, "Oh no, it doesn't." And none of the mainstream media challenged him either on the sale of the NHS or on that.
Do you see the Northern Ireland Protocol? Apparently, I heard this morning, I read this morning, that Simon Coveney said there are now some landing zones for an agreement. But do you see any agreement that the unionists will actually sign up to?
I'd be interested to know what these landing grounds are. It's a great phrase, and Simon Coveney is great with the phrases.
But I don't know what they are either, by the way.
I'm really puzzled as to what they could be. I mean, you've got a fundamental problem that the economy of the north of Ireland essentially relies on the rest of Ireland for its trade. And increasingly, if any company in Northern Ireland wants to export to Europe, if they've got any sense, they're going to send the goods through the Republic, and on the increasingly large number of ferries that are going directly from Rosslare or elsewhere to Europe and bypassing Britain. So Britain is just getting frozen out of the whole thing altogether. And look at Holyhead, look at Stranraer to Larne, all reducing.
Jude, go ahead. I'm dominating this.
I just wanted to ask you, Jeremy, in general terms, is it the case that the British people either will reject a Labour Party, a British Labour Party that is a socialist party, and will only elect a British Labour Party if it is essentially a Tory party, that is Blairism?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think we showed in the 2017 election, where we put forward a manifesto that was challenging the politics and economic proposing a very large public investment program in infrastructure, education, and so on, and public ownership of basic services. I was told from the very beginning, this is impossible, you'll never get any support for it whatsoever. Our polling support went up from 24% to 41% during the campaign, because during that magical window of 4 or 5 weeks, the broadcasting rules require a degree of equality in the way in which television broadcasting happens, and we were able to mobilize a very large number, particularly of young people, into politics in the campaign. So if Labour goes into the next election basically saying we're going to be as pro-business as the Tories, we're going to be as responsible, in quotes, as the Tories on austerity and financial policy, I don't think it's going to excite anybody. You've actually got to offer an alternative, and that is what I tried to do. I had an awful lot of, how should I put it, undermining from within my own party. We managed to get past a lot of that in 2017, much more difficult in 2019.
Fact is, Jeremy, that Blair won 3 elections. People like yourself or Tony Benn, who were, how will we describe you, genuine socialists, simply didn't get anywhere with attaining power.
Well, Blair did win 3 elections, in 97, 2001, 2005. 97, it was basically a walkover. The vote actually, whilst he won in 2001, the vote went down a great deal. There was much less enthusiasm. And 2005, basically, he got lucky with a very low vote on a very low poll, because of the Iraq War, and it was a very close thing for him. We got more votes in 2019 than he got in 2005, but again, the electoral system worked in his favour at that stage. I hope you're not saying that social justice and socialist arguments can never win. I think they can. Looking at the places where Labour gained and Labour lost, there's been a massive population shift across the UK and political demographic shift. My constituency, Islington North, inner city, London, when I was first elected in 1983, had a majority of 5,000. My majority last time was 28,000. And the time before that was 33,000, and the majority that was. So the constituency has, by and large, moved much stronger towards Labour during the period that I've been the MP, which is now nearly 40 years. The equivalent constituencies, take Hemsworth in Yorkshire, represented by my friend John Trickett, in 79, 83, 87 was the safest Labour seat in the country. Majority 26,000, I think, something like that, massive Labour majority. It's now seen as almost marginal, and other places in the north. Now, why is that? Is it, I think, partly because of single industry towns have been replaced by a multiplicity of small enterprises or high levels of depression and underemployment, not so much unemployment as underemployment in those places. And the political culture has not changed to go with it. I recognized this from the very beginning, and spent a lot of energy trying to develop the concept of community organizing. So the Labour Party became much more of a community-based political campaigning body rather than just an electoral machine. And that had some good success in some places, but it takes a long time to do it. The project I'm now involved with, the Project for Justice and Peace, takes that mantle on and does that kind of community organizing work.
To follow on from Jude's question, if I give you 5 minutes now, Jeremy, could you tell me 5 differences between Keir Starmer and David Cameron or John Major?
Well, you want 5 minutes?
No. I'm just saying. I don't see. I heard
That was 5 minutes.
There is a real problem.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer was elected on the as leader of the party and gave the 10 policy pledges he did, and also said that he supported the 2017 and 2019 manifestos. Individually, their policies have all been proved actually quite popular.
Yeah.
He's changed his mind on public ownership. He's changed his mind on anti-austerity politics, and so it goes on. If the Labour Party is just going to retreat and retreat and retreat into a Tory light zone, well,
but hold on, Jeremy, that was Jude's point, isn't it? Tory light now.
Yeah.
Right, here's the.
I said retreat into that.
Yeah, but they're not retreating. They're there. Is it not a case? Is there a space ground for another party? Like, I think I can't speak for you, Jude, but I'm an old-fashioned socialist. I believe in fairness and equality. Maybe it's a remnant, a relic of the hippie days. No, and after I was born in 1953. But it seems to me that when you look at Orban, Trump, Boris Johnson, Bolsonaro, the world has gone populist, and all. Where's the old thing about fairness, equality, decency? That seems to have all gone.
But the things are changing.
Where do you see that?
Bernie Sanders and the left in the USA. Who would have thought? You and I have grown up with the idea that the United States is an incorrigibly free market meritocratic society. That's the line we've been given all our lives.
All our lives.
Who would have thought that Bernie Sanders would come within a whisker of winning the Democrat nomination as a socialist in the United States? Amazing. And so the left in the USA has changed a lot, partly from Black Lives Matters, partly from young people, partly from deindustrialization. The success of left parties in Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Honduras, Mexico is incredible. They're facing massive problems, but there is that growth of the left there. And I do think the movement around climate justice and climate change and the aspirations of young people around the world and the big growing sense that we've got to understand our own and everybody else's histories much better. I'm very hopeful for the future. Does that mean new parties? I don't know at this stage. I'm concentrating on being involved in political campaigning, union rights, solidarity, equality, and justice, all the things that I always do, and let's see what comes out of all that.
Jeremy, how do you
answer the question? Would you lead a new party?
At the moment, I'm a member of the Labour Party, and I'm trying to persuade the party to allow me back into the parliamentary party, and that's my focus.
Okay.
Jeremy, could I ask you, why is it that the people who've been left behind in the United States, the people who've been left behind in the north of England, instead of turning to Bernie Sanders or to the Labour Party, they've gone Tory or they've gone Trump?
To some extent, that's not true in the case of the USA. The Great Lakes states are, yes, very much left behind deindustrialized places, but there was quite a big move back towards them by the Democrats in the last election, and with Biden more or less getting his investment budget through, with some difficulties, but he more or less got it through. There are some changes there. In the north of England, it's a combination of factors, one of which is this sort of feeling of left behind. Now, going back to the Brexit referendum, our position was that we should stay in the EU but reform it, particularly the state aid rules and things like that. I realised with about 10 days to go in the referendum we were going to lose, because I was talking to people who in different parts of the country, all over the country, and they were saying to me, well, what's the EU do for us? What's the point of it? And I was sort of trying to say, well, you know, I think it's better that we work with people in other countries. No. All they're doing is making life hard for us. Their vote was as much against them being left behind because of deindustrialization under Thatcher and the failure of the new Labour government and the Tory government succeeded to actually invest anything meaningful in those communities. You've got dependencies, where my whole point about there has to be a political imperative of something different. And when we were in Craigan yesterday, we were talking about economic development. Governments of themselves cannot sit in Whitehall, Belfast, Dublin, or anywhere else and decide what should happen in every community. It simply doesn't work like that. You've got to have bottom-up democracy and empowering of people, which is where cooperatives, cooperative development, and development of community consciousness comes about. And that has to be the right way forward to me. And I think the climate crisis that we're in is a crisis we're in. It can't be solved by free market economics. It can't be solved by going to war. It can only be dealt with by managing our economic activities and not producing for waste, but producing for need. You can't produce for need, not waste, in a free market economy. You have to change tack.
Jude, we have to wrap it up shortly.
One last
you can ask the last
question. Jeremy, just to bring it back to Bloody Sunday, do you think if what happened in Derry 50 years ago, if that had happened in a British city, an English city, would the response have been different?
Yes, no question.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because of the attitude of the British establishment, the attitude of the British media. Oh, it's over there. It's in Ireland, and it's a completely different approach. If it had happened in an English city, it would have been a very different response. And there's been no occasion since probably the First World War that British troops have been put on the streets of an English city. I think the last time was probably in South Wales during the mines dispute in 1911. There's been, but in Northern Ireland, I remember the troops going in was it 68, 69 period, 69. And I remember that picture of Jim Callaghan addressing a crowd with a loudhailer through an upstairs window of a house. You remember that?
Yeah. Bogside.
Bogside, correct. And saying the troops are here to protect you and to help you, and they're not going to stay very long. My God, it turned out to be the longest deployment ever of British troops in British history. And it is a whole question of attitudes on Ireland, which is where I go back to my point. The history I was taught of Ireland in school was appalling. It was somehow or other like the famine in the 19th century was the fault of the farmers for growing the potatoes wrongly.
Yeah.
You know, failing at any stage to be told that actually Ireland was being forced to export food to Britain during the time of starvation and so on. And so I do think it's all of that understanding. And
but Jeremy, what about that thing of Thatcher? Sorry for interrupting, but
that's right.
Remember Thatcher said it's British essentially. What you're saying is, had it happened on, say, Birmingham or Wolverhampton, it would have been different, but it happened in Derry.
It happened in Derry because Derry is in Ireland. Derry is, so far as London politicians are concerned, a long way away. I'm utterly convinced it would have been very, very different, and it would have been very surprising if British troops had been put on the streets of a British city. And even Thatcher did not put the the soldiers into the mining communities during the miners' strike of
Yeah.
84, 85.
Mhm.
She brought an awful lot of police there, and they did some horrible things, particularly in South Yorkshire. But they did not put the troops in
Yeah.
because they were scared to.
I can hear voices outside. I presume people are
I
getting
thought you were going
nervous.
to say, hey, boy, sitting ahead of something. He's hearing
Jeremy,
voices.
thank you very much. It's been really interesting, and I echo Pat's being honoured at your presence, and all good wishes for the future. And thank you for
very
coming.
much. It's great to be here, and I had a fantastic time. And I'm going to be coming back pretty soon, partly because I've got some stuff on in Dublin, but also I want to spend a lot more time in Donegal.
Oh,
Jude,
who could
thanks
blame
very
you?
much, Jude.
Okay,
See
Pat.
you later.
Okay,
Thanks,
Jeremy. Bye.
Jeremy. Thanks, Jeremy. Cheers. Bye.